agentic AI is going to become the new customer interface. And you're looking at this as just in a silo of some of the companies we compete with in the market look at it as customer service automation, and we are like, hey, no, you got to ask yourself the question, why does customer service exist?
Awesome. Well, Puneet Mehta, welcome. So happy to have you.
Great to be here, Nick, and great to see you today.
Great. Yeah, I love actually, obviously, I looked into your background and I love your background. It's like, there's there's something special, I think, that you get in a career in this industry when you've been both a consumer and then also someone who is now supplying the industry as well. It provides a perspective that I wish more people, frankly, had. So anyway, so I'm really looking forward to chatting with you and learning more about you and also about the company you founded. So,
Oh,
are you ready?
absolutely.
Great. Okay. Well, I thought like on that vein, why don't we start with so I want you to one big part about these podcasts is for us to kind of share, people's stories, and for people to get to know who you are. So there's about almost 100,000 people in the community, now, and so for particular thought leaders, we want to make sure, like, everyone gets to know you. So why don't we start with a little bit of your career journey? Kind of where you came and how you started into the industry, how you got started, and then kind of where you are now. So I know you're an MIT or two, which is great. I spent some time at MIT. I didn't get my degree there, but I spent graduate work, at MIT. So great institution, and a lot of really great engineers came from there as well.
Yeah, so just talking about the work that I've done over the last couple of decades or a little bit more than that. Started in research, early researcher at one of the Watson Research Centers working on reinforcement learning, and from there I went to we spent about a decade at three different firms on Wall Street, mostly within capital markets, building event correlation engines. There was kind of this foundation for what down the line would started to become automated trading, but absorbing early signals from there, doing things like language understanding when the models weren't nearly as great. So yeah, I did some early work there at three different firms, and like you rightly pointed out, I was on the other side of these large enterprises, and finding out what does it take for a really large company to have a mission critical system, and that helped us establish a way better foundation for Netomi when we started building for the large enterprises, because we had been in the shoes of our customers, making those hard choices, building for trust, building for safety, and especially for mission critical systems where you cannot afford for them to go wrong. You cannot afford for them, to make any kind of either failures or mistakes. So a lot of lessons learned from there. After spending a little over a decade there, I started a company that ended up becoming BMW Mobility Service. We used to do prediction on location data. And then, when I started in Tomi, the core thesis was that agentic AI is going to become the new customer interface. And you're looking at this as just in a silo of some of the companies we compete with in the market look at it as customer service automation, and we are like, hey, no, you got to ask yourself the question, why does customer service exist? We just go back to kind of the first principles thinking and say, why does it exist? What is the problem that it solves? Like, could we leapfrog that entire thought process that a system or process could break, and then you have to go back and fix it? So that's the space that where we started the company, saying if AI becomes this new customer interface, you could leapfrog how companies, especially large companies, interact with and support customers. How do they build trust? What's the new definition of trust in that word? But we were challenging all of those foundational things, especially as we said, if this resource, which is cognition, or which will used to be done with people, it becomes abundant. Then how do you act in that world? How does this become a new building block for business? So that's what my career has been like. Came from research, applied research in real life situations for over a decade, and then came on this side to say, hey, we've learned enough on what happens in those deployment cycles. Now let's go build something foundational that the world's largest companies could use.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, God, you have a lot of experience in the kinds of like logs, sys files, events, that get emitted from all the devices that are in an application's dependency map, and to be able to analyze those, to either kind of build for trust, or build for performance, or just build for stability. So it's a really great experience base, especially now. And so I know we'll get to talk about Netomi. And so feel free to kind of weave that in as we go. But I thought maybe what we start with is there's we had this session at the last summit, and it was about why do 96% of AI projects fail, and just the difficulty of moving large AI projects from proof of concepts into production. But that really doesn't talk towards like operations, like network operations and network engineers and kind of network security. Actually, the success rate there is much higher, but they still struggle. So let's kind of focus in on kind of infrastructure planning and infrastructure lifecycle management, and then. So I guess maybe the first question is, where does AI add value for today's both network engineers and maybe security engineers, as they are focused on both monitoring, doing incident triage, where networking and security are somehow tightly interwoven together, trying to help and accelerate root cause analysis, overall lifecycle management, and I think without overpromising, and I'm not sure if the industry is overpromising yet or not, but I think there is a gap that I've been seeing, around what large consumers are doing, and also what some of them are actually saying, but also like what the vendor community has been talking to, about what's possible. So let's start there, like kind of more concrete, like where AI is kind of adding value in that kind of lifecycle management. Okay.
Absolutely. So, the business that we are in at Netomi, we are in the application tier, and we focus on customer experience. Like that's our main use case. So, although, I would love to offer an opinion on how does this affect some of the components around network engineering and the overall infrastructure lifecycle, in full transparency, that's not the technology that we offer in the market. But yeah, the way we look at that, because I dealt with some of that in past lives, is I think it just helps you extract context much faster. So what used to happen in the old way of doing things was, you had models, you had algorithms that would extract context from this information and tell you where was it worthwhile to pay attention to, what small pockets, because it was humanly impossible to pay attention to every single pocket of information. And these models and algorithms kind of acted as a conduit, if you will, to say, hey, here are 10 things that are worth paying attention to because this is an opportunity or a risk. So in the new world, that's what AI can do significantly better by like 2 orders of magnitude. And setting that up has also become much easier. So the total cost of ownership for those kind of systems has dropped. The amount of nuance you can include in that context filters has increased. And then lastly, with agentic architectures, you're actually able to address some of these proactively. So it takes you from this responsive mode to this proactive mode. So as I put myself in the shoes of that cohort, we're obviously not selling to that cohort, but I just look at that tier of technology, and I think their lives are completely upgraded now with agentic AI acting in those 3 ways.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Okay, so then let's talk about Netomi. So, like, I know you're an agentic AI, company, and so that you have kind of, you're really kind of looking at various different workflows. and how agentic can either take over those flows or augment existing flows, make them more reliable and so forth. So one which so who's your typical customer? I know Delta, not Delta, but United Airlines. I know Starkins, DraftKings, are two kind of notable, customers. But like, where in those organizations, are they kind of using Netomi?
Yeah, so we work with the world's largest companies in a few different verticals, whether it's travel and hospitality, retail and e-commerce, insurance, banking, telco, and then media and gaming. So those are kind of the six main areas that we focused on.
Well, that's big. That's almost the entire economy, but that's big. That's big. So good. Congrats.
We largely work with B2C companies in those space, because if you think about how
Yes.
structure our technology, we go after the biggest spenders in customer experience, and those six verticals are kind of the biggest spenders in customer experience, if you will. There's obviously a bunch of other parts of the economy, right? You got tech, you got manufacturing, you got supply chain, you got like a lot of these other
Yeah.
businesses. So, but these six are, if you look at their P&Ls, this is one of their top five spend areas. So we can provide significant cost savings and efficiency there. The way we look at the world is, we're not just trying to replicate human workflows in AI. We think that's a really dumb way to address this problem. And unfortunately, all the companies we compete with, including the large incumbents, um, are looking at the world that way. And we think that whole thought process is fundamentally flawed. Because if all you're doing is taking a human centric workflow and turning it into a hard coded, hardwired, agentic workflow, you only put AI to 10% of the use that it's able to deliver, the value that it's able to deliver. The real value comes from having the dynamic orchestration for many of what used to be called workflows, but that's the only way we could trace them in the old world, because they were mostly wired for safety. They were not wired for true capability. If especially if you could run compute across various different context cycles. So now if you look at these context windows are increasing. It's going from task driven decision making to more scene driven decision making, and the scene could include customer context from the literally last 3 years of 5 years of what interactions they've had, what's happening in their life. So it goes back to what our CTO Bobby Gupta and I were building for Wall Street, were these massive context engines that could subscribe to market data and really create a scene-based view on why a trading engine should make a certain bet. Or so we're bringing that kind of thinking and thought process to customer experience, and that's why we think the whole idea of a workflow by itself might be flawed for this agentic world, where you might be able to dynamically stitch together certain actions to serve a certain scene within a certain customer context. And that's the huge unlock here, because you can apply that not just to cost savings, you can apply that to upsell, cross sell, you can apply that to personalization. So with AI becoming the new interface, new customer interface, that's the value that it's supposed to deliver.
Yeah, so I think the concept that you really have is that don't try to replicate workflows that we've been doing for decades, maybe with people. We have a new opportunity to kind of really just rethink workflows based upon agents, and to move at the speed of agents, and potentially the reliability of agents. And so there may be more inputs into that workflow now that actually generate a different outcome, a better outcome for companies. So you're really kind of focusing on business process and business logic, and not so much on the compute infrastructure, of an organization. You're kind of you're leveraging that compute infrastructure, but it's really you're really focusing on kind of business logic and business process.
Yeah, we are squarely in the application tier. We leverage the infrastructure and the models that a company has to offer, and but we do it with the lens of customer context and a customer situation and the life cycle of the customer. And we think that's actually transformational for a lot of these large companies,
Yeah.
because they've never really had the opportunity to do that. Everything was bottom up.
Yeah.
Everything was based on, hey, here's my business process, customer, go adapt to it. I'm only going to make my call center available until 10 p.m. It's on you to call us and wait for freaking 45
Right.
minutes in
Yeah.
line. So customers are always having to adapt to a certain business process. For the first time, companies can adapt to a customer's needs in the moment with this scene based methodology while having sanctioned AI. That's kind of the secret sauce with Natomi, is that the reason these very large companies love us is we are not asking them to change their policies and procedures, but we are getting them or enabling them or empowering them to deliver that same policy and procedure in the context of a customer in the most empathetic way possible.
Yeah. This is so fundamental. Actually, this is just really great. I'm so glad that um, yeah, for some reason I was focusing on infrastructure, and really this is a much broader, deeper conversation, about um, helping companies move their AI journey from token consumption to really transformation.
Yep.
With an agentic AI infrastructure. So on agentic, then we've been focusing, on this space. There's a working group called the Agentic AI Overlay Working Group, and so we focus on, okay, agents, not just single vendor agents, but also multi vendor agents, multi domain agents, and also how those agents operate within either a single trust zone, maybe your own enterprise, or multiple trust zones, right? So like there may be agents that are within an LLM, and they're accessing tools and data, based upon what is being asked for them to do.
Mhm.
So that's a really big and really complicated space. There's a lot of security concerns associated with that. They're probably all security concerns, kind of all associated with that. So
Definitely.
where do you scope that out? For your customers, like you can't do all of that, but so I would think most of it is like single trust domain, maybe two trust domains, and either single agents or maybe one or two agents. So how are you approaching the market?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you rightly pointed out, it's a hard problem to solve, especially because companies have fundamentally gotten used to having these systems in silos and even having their procedures and policies in silos, and
Yeah,
all the protective policies that sit around systems are actually in silos, right? So when you really become that customer centric, when you have AI become the new customer interface, it will access the different silos, right? And it will attempt to serve the customer in a way that they don't feel that they're having to interact with five different parts of an organization and being bounced around from one to the other. But that comes with the responsibility to be able to respect the policy and the protection and the safety and the guardrails that comes with each component. So that's what Natomi is built for. That's why we're getting selected by the largest companies on the planet for that exact reason, that we are able to safely orchestrate across these different systems and organizations in the large complex company while protecting specific guardrails for each endpoint. And whenever guardrails from two different components that are orchestrated in a specific customer journey step on each other, we have a system, we have an agentic factory that actually creates an alert and says, hey, in this particular situation, it's not going to work because you're telling me one thing in this one system, but the guidance I'm getting from the other system that a different team owns within the same company is different. So how do you want me to serve this customer? And in fact, that's a great outcome as well, right? Because we've all dealt with this as consumers. We've all dealt, when we call that airline we travel on, when we call that credit card company, when we call that hotel we're staying at. Sometimes we get conflicting guidance from different people, and having agentic AI become that new customer interface helps solve that problem as well. So long story short, not only do we have a system in place with our agentic factory to handle that exact situation? But it actually empowers the organization to even take it a step further, not just apply those specific policies from every moving part, but also find discrepancies and conflicting that.
Okay, this yeah, actually, really great conversation. Puneet, can you can we? I'm not sure how open maybe United Airlines is it for you to maybe explain what you've done there, or DraftKings. That might kind of like bring everything into focus, in terms of like, how, they're kind of consuming Netomi and what kind of outcome. Maybe we start obviously with the classic business problem, solution, outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of this is also everybody that's watching the podcast. We can also read about it on the OpenAI website. OpenAI recently did a feature on Netomi that has some of this information on what the work you're doing with United, the work we're doing with DraftKings.
We'll
So
include links to that, in the podcast.
Perfect. Yeah, and then if you look at a company like DraftKings, the whole premise there is that people who are consumers, who are customers of DraftKings, many times or sometimes need support, and the DraftKings being that having that AI first mindset is finding how to provide or figuring out or has created an architecture on how to provide that in the moment proactive kind of support to their customers. And that's where Netomi comes in on the application tier. We're using Netomi's application tier and OpenAI models. They've been able to create this amazing you know um, concierge type of experience for their customers, where anytime a customer has a question, they can, on their own terms, any time of the day or the week, based on completely compliant architecture, because sports betting, as you know, has is regulated differently in different states. So they have to build a really sophisticated architecture within Tomi to be fully compliant, yet be fully available in the moment in a proactive way to their customers. So kudos to their team on how they created this, but it's the most forward thinking agentic AI deployment in their industry. And now their customers love it, gets really great feedback, gives them a competitive edge over everybody else in the industry, and also gives them the kind of really rich interaction data that helps them continue to form that highly customer centric organization that they're known for. So the impact of this is those three things, right? Is the impact of this is the customers feel helped. Once you do this at an economy of scale, it provides significant cost savings. But then also the insights created from this kind of an agentic layer helps them continue to be that customer centric, customer focused organization they're known for.
Okay, but what did DraftKings get? And what did the customer get? With this, was it better response time? Access to better data? Correlation of data? For them to make better, bets? The betting averages change. It's like just looking to see kind of like what was the net effect?
Yeah, so based on the maintaining the regulatory needs of their business, um, the things that they were trying to deliver to consumers in this context was that availability of support right in the second, right? Nobody has to have a long wait time or, and then get highly contextual information, not just siloed task driven answers, but really combining the information that they have, combining all the policies that DraftKings has, and being able to deliver a highly context sensitive and customer focused resolution to whatever the customer reached out for. So yeah,
Okay.
so the customers get near zero wait time. The customers get highly contextual resolutions to even nuanced situations. And what DraftKings gets is obviously that keeping to move forward on that customer centricity, but also cost savings. And then also this whole idea that once you invest in AI being the main customer interface, you could leverage that for anything, right? Down the line, you
Yeah.
could leverage that for better relationships, higher retention. But yeah, in this version one of agentic AI, if you will, the one that is featured on the OpenAI story, those are some of the key outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. So great. So, for example, like we've had Svigal, who's the CTO of a Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and he has injected AI, and he's kind of looked at the entire journey of a patient. You know, when they kind of call to schedule, when they when they come for their visit, when they're with their doctor, you know, and then also when they're you know, on the back end when they're interacting with kind of payment systems and healthcare systems. And you know, so on the front end of it is like, you know, when people call now, you know, they that's all AI generated, you know, and so he's seeing just huge improvements in people willing to stay on, you know, to interact, to get satisfied with the meetings that they've scheduled. When they're in with their doctor, they used to be that you would have kind of a doctor, and there would be somebody with a computer on a kind of a kind of almost like you know, a tabletop, you know, that's on wheels, and they're taking notes. Now all that's recorded is AI generated, and so you can log in and you can actually hear and see everything. Not see, but you can hear, you know, all of the discussion that happens. This is a cancer center, right? So like doctors sometimes are giving you news that is life altering and life changing, and so when that happens, you blank out. You don't listen anymore, you know. And so so now it's like, okay, they have a recording of that. They have a transcript, you know, of that, and also they stop processing, and so they have a whole slew of questions that now comes to them after the visit. So now they can actually interact, you know, with their doctor. And then the doc also, when the doc is providing guidance and also treatment, the system now has reviewed or has been, you know, interacting with so many doctors, and in that one, and a particular doctor, they may have seen this a patient with the same kind of symptoms, and then the system will also tell them, okay, well, this is what was prescribed before, and this was the outcome, and so they're getting feedback from the system as well. And then on the back end, you know, when you're dealing with healthcare systems and payment systems, they really try to like utilize AI to simplify that process. So, so I think so. It's almost like, you know, what you've done for DraftKings is that when you are interacting with that brand, you now have a much better, smoother interface. You know, much quicker response time interface. And what DraftKings gets out of that is probably a much quicker ROI, a reduction in cost, and also increased customer satisfaction, which is freaking huge. That's, you know, that's a great value proposition.
Yep.
And is that the same with United Air?
Yeah, yeah. So similar kind of outcomes over there. You know, obviously, um, you know, the context of a situation could be you know, significantly richer depending on if you're at the airport facing, you know, something, or you're yet to get to the airport. You're flying in 2 days. You've already landed somewhere, and you want to know about your baggage. So they're different. You know, the same question asked could mean very different things depending on situational awareness.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
similar kind of business outcomes, but it's a very, you know, complex kind of context graph,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
depending on the situation the customer is in.
Yeah. A lot of variables. I think, you know, what it seems really where kind of sweet spot, you know, for AI is like in really complex workflows. You know,
Mhm.
it seems like the more complex, you know, the better it's suited for. Um, you know, and you know, airlines like, you know, like weather, you know, and rebooking. You know, that's a multi-variable problem. You know, with lots of, you know, well, multi-variable is lots of variables. You know, so it's like, yeah, and so so great. So they're getting a good outcome, you know, with that too, and obviously so are customers if they can get to where they need to get, you know, faster with less hassle and less
Yep.
headache.
Yep. Right.
Okay. So the biggest issue that we've been seeing within the community for agentic is a lot of the security piece of
Mhm.
it. So how do you do, um, you know, identity for agents? You know, how do you do? authentication, for agents. How do you assure that agents don't go rogue, and if they do go rogue, how do you delete them from operating? How do you make sure that agents aren't, accessing particular tools and data that they shouldn't? So rules based, is really important for agents. A lot of these problems that we solved for humans, um, I guess a human agent, is now is harder in the agent world because like you can spin agents up so quickly,
Yeah.
now. So how are you all addressing, the security side of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's an entire, you're spot on there. First of all, where this is a real problem, and there are platforms out there that just don't address it. And the solution for them is, hey, let's just hope nothing goes off the guardrails and nothing goes wrong, but it invariably does, right? So with Natomi, with the agentic factory, we've actually built the agentic OS, which takes into account all of these things. You obviously have identity tracked across the ensemble of AI agents, um, and then there's access control within each AI agent. And then what we have done, which is a big breakthrough compared to everybody else in the industry, is we don't just have a capability matrix for each AI agent, we also have an authority matrix. So, how most companies are confusing this is, if an AI agent has the capability, is it always authorized to perform an action? Absolutely not. That's not how our human workforces work. And then, so that's the first huge differentiator there is, dividing or having a clear line between capability and authority, and tracking the authority matrix. And every task that an AI agent does, or every process an AI agent is a part of, is run by the authority matrix. And then we have maker checker models. So these are not just supervisory models that are checking this after the fact. For certain compliant processes, even after going through the authority matrix, you got to run that by the checker. The output has to go through by the checker. Now, obviously, you only apply it to places where you can afford a few microseconds of additional latency that the checker model goes through. But then for compliant processes, it's a must have, right? You cannot, like, there's some industries in insurance and banking that just cannot do without that. And the last one obviously is the supervisory model, where just like human agents or human employees have supervisors, you've got to have supervisory models that are doing real time assessment of everything that's happening, that are finding threats and opportunities. And then the last layer in this whole 5 layered cake is the feedback based learning, so that once what are the opportunities and threats, once what are the areas where there's work required, how do you flow that back in, so that again you don't have a multi-month lag between when you find something that needs to be tweaked or changed and actually being able to change it. So that's what makes Natomi at least a generation ahead compared to our closest competitors, because they don't have their operating system. So operationalizing AI, we've looked at that with a very, very hard lens, compared to some of these other companies that are kind of selling namesake toys, but they don't really operationalize AI for large companies properly.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Great. Puneet. So I think I just want to kind of close with one question. It might take us a little while to answer it though, but it's more kind of looking out over a couple of years. So we're in really early days of agentic AI. We know this marketplace and this industry is moving extremely fast. It's moving fast in terms of the model development, the size of the data centers that we're building, and I think there are different time scales. So there's like the kind of public consuming AI, like the chat GPTs and the XAIs and so forth. And then there is the full adoption by enterprises. Consumers clearly, I'm not sure where we are with adoption, but I would think we're probably over 50%, adoption of consumers that are using AI for kind of a wide range of different use cases. But to do the things in the large enterprise, that to me, from our community, it's slower because they're regulated entities, they're bigger, they're more complex, and they don't want to be, kind of in the news for all the wrong reasons. So I think so. Maybe what's your view over the next 2 to 3 years of agentic, and how widespread it would be, and maybe we can focus on particular, use cases. Like the use case that you've been focusing on is around customer interaction. So really, kind of a whole new metaphor or relationship between a brand and a consumer. So that, clearly, I think that's well underway, and you guys are really doing a great job leading in that area. But what other areas do you think that we'll really see? And obviously, software engineering, within large organizations, they're fully entrenched in building it. They're getting a good 30% return, if not more, on using, coding tools, AI coding tools.
Yeah, absolutely. So, maybe I'll start with yeah, our the place where Netomi adds value, which is in the customer experience area.
Yeah.
So you broadly look at this market. There's about 500 billion spent each year on companies enabling interactivity with customers, which includes customer support, helping them through the journey, all types of customer experience, products and services. So it's a very large market. The way we think agentic is going to reframe that entire market is, again, there are companies, you talk to a lot of these companies that are known for their CRMs, etc. Like, they all they're trying to do is take a human workflow and automate it with agentic AI, and they're not even able to do that successfully, right?
Yeah.
We think that's like a least common denominator version of what would take shape in the next 2 or 3 years. The idea would be to go back to first principles and be like, hey, like, is there a way that we can leapfrog this? Is there a way we take support from being responsive to being proactive, in fact being preemptive? Like, could we prevent bigger problems from happening? The idea is not to automate every single customer support ticket. The idea is to have lesser support tickets, right? But because the financial models for all these companies, the incumbents, are aligned with seats or volume of support tickets or number of leads in a CRM, we think they're not even properly placed to be able to address this in a way that does not end up completely disrupting their existing businesses. So where we think this is headed is, that enabling AI as a new customer interface, where customers are able to interact with companies on their own terms. It becomes significantly proactive. I don't always have to reach out. The company reaches out to me instead and says, hey, I'm going to reschedule you on a certain flight because this one is experiencing a 20-minute delay, and you might miss your connection. Like, that level of context, right? So the what we'll experience as consumers, what we would call really great customer experience and support, those experiences are going to completely leapfrog, not just automate, but leapfrog and become proactive and preemptive. The other aspect, as we look at this, is what does this do to large organizations that have built systems in silos, because that was the only way to operate before agentic AI. So it places the burden on them to make sure their agentic systems are compliant. So it would be, they'll have to start including that in their RFP processes, looking at this with the trust lens. Trust, not just can the company trust the AI, but now they're putting this AI in front of their customers, right? Would they build enough trust? What happens with the residual trust? What about all of the data that is now stored in these models that they're using? How do you use it in a privacy first environment? So if you think about, what impact does it have on the operations of a company? I'm not sure how many of the largest companies on the planet that are especially not working with companies like Netomi are prepared for that, right? So they got to start looking at it with that more sophisticated lens. And the third thing I would say is, um, just looking at this as a new building block for modern business. There'll be new products, new services, new way to interact with customers that you can uncover. So these same companies that offer certain products and services, just because now this resource has become abundant, which is the ability to interact with the customer and be able to serve them in context, will be able to launch new products and services. And the overarching thing I would say is, today, if you look at these interaction model, again, going back to how we got to leapfrog workflows, the way customers interact with businesses today are they either go to a website or a mobile app, or they send an email, or they pick up the phone and call, or they're chatting. Um, but soon consumers would be represented by an AI agent on the internet, right? So it would not be consumers calling businesses; it would be their AI agent that is able to interact with the business. Now, are the businesses ready for that? Is the question.
Yeah.
So there be businesses that would get ready for it much faster than others, and then they would become leaders in their category. So yeah, there's like we think there's going to be a lot of great things we'll see as consumers that benefit. We'll see a lot of businesses will see this as a big benefit. But then again, it's time for everybody to like really button up and put on their seatbelt and start getting on this journey with the right partner, because otherwise they're going to get left behind, and that could disrupt the entire business.
Yeah, I think I love, especially your last 2 points. It's that there is a fundamental rethinking around business process. I think that's going to be occurring, here, and it's like our industry, the IT industry, has built itself on essentially providing software for a system of record
Mhm.
within organizations, and those could be in finance, they're in HR, they're in engineering and manufacturing. It's like all the various different silos that are associated with different parts of the business, and those systems of record are very deterministic, right? There might be a million lines of code. There might be like I don't know, say 100, 200 features that companies might only use like 10 their features from.
Yep.
And so I think what agentic offers is the ability to move us from this deterministic approach into a more automated and predictive approach, where you're not just in the silos, but you're really kind of cutting across the various different silos to try to understand business impact on key decisions. And that could be the launch of a new product, and or it could be price alterations and fluctuations. It could be a wide range of different things, but to
Yep.
really get an insight. And I think to me that's the real value add in the agentic world. It's really that's the move from consuming tokens as your AI strategy to really transform into an enterprise, um, or an AI driven enterprise. And you guys are in that marketplace. And so, thanks for sharing, all of the insights and the thought leadership that you gain from being in that position. So, Puneet, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, this it's been a fun conversation and a pleasure to be here, and appreciate talking to this today.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, send us those links and we'll include them. Okay.
Awesome, great.
Okay. Thank you, Puneet.
Okay, thanks so much, Nick. Take care.